Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and as always, I am joined by my fellow fifth-round draft pick, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, how do you feel about going on day 3 along with me? I went in with the early pick, though, you know.
A day 3 selection is what I've always hoped for. It's what I've worked for. I just want to do the right things by the team, man.
No, man, I got a chip on my shoulder. I'm ready to get to work and prove everyone that I should have been a first-round pick, man. We're just joshing everyone. We're not any round picks. We're not even undrafted free agents, but aside from the point, we hope you hold us in a higher regard. We thank you for listening, as always, and just a little bit of a programming note to start this right out the gate. We're coming to you late this week because myself and Brian have a lot of busy things going on, and we couldn't get the professor lined up or anybody else. Everybody's just busy. I think it's because of Mother's Day, Brian. So in advance, a happy Mother's Day to you. And I think we'll, instead of trying to logjam a bunch of programming in between each one another or whatever, we're going to just come to you again early next week and get back to hopefully our regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah. Happy Mother's Day to every mother I know.
Absolutely. And my brother from another
and
mother.
The ones I don't know, too. All mothers. Any mother of any variety. All moms. Now you're going a little too far. We talked about picture books, and I started thinking about American Pie here. So we'll just leave it at that. We got some things to talk about. You know, that was another reason it was like, we're not going to stretch everyone's, ears by trying to jam a bunch of stuff here. We are going to talk today about some more positional groups and how those may look here in the future for the Steelers. But one of the reasons, we had a lot to talk about, for months because of Mr. Big Chest, Ronald Ocean, whatever it is, and now not so much material, although there is another occurrence of things that happen. And I know people are sick of hearing about a he who shall not be named 84. Has 84 been officially reissued yet? I keep hearing Deontay Johnson might get it, but I don't think it has been. It's not official yet, correct? I don't think it is yet either. I don't think so.
Nothing would give me more joy than just reissuing that number ASAP and forgetting about a 1AB as the initials are. And one reason I did want to bring this up, even though it's like, why are we still talking about this guy? Everybody's salty. These are things that people say. Well, there's a lot of criticism the other way too that says the Steelers were wrong. They're in the wrong for what transpired and trying to get into Antonio Brown's head, and which I don't think anybody's going to be able to do at this point. But anyways, just trying to see everything, and people are like, "Well, you got rid of an All-Pro player. The Steelers are at fault. They got nothing for it." Well, do we even know that he's going to play this year? I mean, at this point, he went on his Instagram. If you're not aware, he went on his Instagram. And it's definitely his Instagram. It has a blue check mark, and it has 3.2 or 3.4 million followers on Instagram. And he's only following, 2 people? I'm going to actually pull this up because I forgot exactly what it was, how many that he had. And deleted all of his posts and his profile picture. And this is a guy that was talking about social media. Oh, it says he has 2 posts, but they must be private. So he must have had something there. He's following actually a whopping 0 people, but it does still say 8 times 4 equals 32. Call God, his official Snapchat, business inquiries, #boomin', all this other stuff. And it's just like, well, now he's unfollowed and undone everything, and it's a complete mystery as to what is going on here. But I guess my thought process here is that, hey, guess what? This isn't the Steelers' problem anymore, and whatever happens in the future, whether he plays, doesn't play, out of the league in 2 years, catches for 2,000 yards, whatever it may be that he does, good or bad, it's no longer the Steelers' problem, and for that I say hooray, and I tip my cap to the organization.
Yeah, I don't know what any of this means. I don't know that he knows what any of this means. But, even on Twitter, while he may be following, I'm not going to go through his 3,413 people he's following, but within his profile, no longer says anything about any team at all other than he's an all-pro wide receiver. I don't know. Look, I don't know who had the over-under on how many days it takes before Antonio Brown gets mad at somebody on the Raiders. I don't know. What's the over-under on the next time he tweets something that nobody can make any sense of? Hours, minutes, days, who knows?
Is he still tweeting? I don't even know. I'm going to look up Twitter, the Twitters right now and see if Antonio Brown is still out there.
The last official tweet from him was on May 6th, which was "Call God, that's all you need."
Well, he retweeted something. There was somebody who bought an Antonio Brown.
He's been retweeting things.
Yeah, Antonio
Brown.
But
that's what I'm saying. I don't count that.
No, not really. Call God, it's all you need. Mile high, steady flow. I don't understand anything. Beat the odds right now. # be encouraged. Little man, he's a lot of people that are buying his jersey. He's all over that. So I don't know. I have no idea what's going on. Honestly, I don't even care, to be completely honest. But I just wanted to kind of bring that up because one of the guys we're going to talk about today, what the position group we're focusing on is the quarterbacks. And, of course, one of the guys we're talking about is received a fair amount of blame in this situation. We've also said for I don't know however long this has been a situation or a story, that don't blame Ben. And I think today, it's important to point out the reason why Ben Roethlisberger was extended, given a large amount of money, and for the foreseeable future, the Steelers quarterback, because, well, first and foremost, why would you go in any other direction? Obviously, the Steelers, they had to make a choice, right? It was, if there's a spat there and it was between AB and Ben, who do you think is going to stay? It's always going to be the quarterback. It doesn't matter if it's Ben or probably even Matthew Stafford for that matter, unless it's something really egregious, a really bad off-the-field thing. Quarterback's not going anywhere. Am I right?
Provided it's a franchise quarterback, absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have said Matthew Stafford. That was probably a bad example. But, I mean, even him.
Look, I don't know. If your all-pro wide receiver gets into a spat with Bruce Gradkowski,
well,
even if he's starting for you right then and there because your franchise quarterback's hurt, I don't know. Maybe Bruce is gone. But we said this before, and it's always going to be true. A franchise quarterback trumps all. It doesn't matter. They're too hard to find, too rare to find. And I don't want to say good receivers are a dime a dozen, but good receivers are a dime a dozen. So
this is true. This is very true. I was going to say, did I use the term kingmaker yet? Because it came to mind. It was the first thing that was actually in my brain. And what I mean by that is that Ben Roethlisberger has made a career of making other wide receivers look good. And
absolutely,
I think of other quarterbacks, Brian. I mean, who comes off the top of your head is making other guys look good? Obviously, you got to say Tom Brady. As much as it makes me want to vomit in my mouth, he's there. Obviously, probably Drew Brees. If you're looking at current guys, Peyton Manning, obviously one of the all-time greats. I was thinking even further back, like Joe Montana or Dan Marino. Like, I thought about a lot of the players that left those teams, and even when Joe Montana went to the Chiefs for that short spell and made those guys look absolutely amazing. I guess Brett Favre, who I used to get sick about talking about, but people finally stopped caring about him a long time ago, and they realized he was like 60 years old and definitely not coming out of retirement again. I kid. But I mean, Brett Favre even made guys like Sidney Rice and who else, like a Percy Harvin or guys like that, get decent contracts elsewhere and put up some decent numbers and things of that nature. So, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger is probably worth every single penny. I just don't get the, backlash about extending him. And they're doing some accounting and some funny money with this, and it's to keep your franchise quarterback. And I'm going to go through some of the records here, but it's to keep your franchise quarterback, who more than likely will not be replaced, will not be replicated, duplicated, or in any form or fashion cloned. They're not going to find the next Ben Roethlisberger. It's just like trying to find the next Ryan Shazier, or the next Jerome Bettis, or the next Troy Polamalu. It's just not going to happen. So I don't think Ben's even slowing down. You don't hear a whole lot from him. He's even thinking about stepping away from his radio show now to have even less controversy. I see no problem going into the foreseeable future with Big Ben as the guy under center.
No, look, one of the things, or one of the trending or trendy comments or hot takes that people think is lit I'm really trying hard with this vernacular for Zaccadonia. But one of the things that has come out is, Tom Brady doesn't make that much money. He takes a team discount. No, he doesn't. No. He may not make as much salary, but Tom Brady, 12 of his stupid company gets paid. Guess where that money goes? In Tom Brady's pocket. The Patriots found a way to circumvent it. That's all. He gets probably, if you add up all the income he has, more than anybody else. It's not that Tom Brady's taking a hometown discount. They just found a way to pay him differently. That isn't, I'm not going to say it's a violation of the rules because it isn't until it is. And they probably won't change it until somebody else comes up and does it. And then they'll say, this is out of control. Anyway,
the Eagles,
be that as it may,
the Eagles were doing some of the funny accounting too. And now that it's out, the cat's out of the bag, more teams are going to be doing this. If you don't realize what we're talking about, folks, they got a salary cap in pro football. There's only so much money these teams are allowed to spend. This isn't baseball, and then you get luxury taxed and. I hate to bring up baseball just because the Pirates don't spend money at all, but the Steelers are spending their money where it should be spent, but they can only spend so much. So some of these teams have figured out some loopholes after about 8 years of the CBA where they can shift some of this money around and create more space to sign other players.
Yeah, exactly. And with Brady, I think it's even a more different thing. It's a way for him to get paid, because who said they have to use Tom Brady's company to do any of the training or to contract with? But they do, and he's going to get paid. But if you really want to look at it, did Ben do a disservice to the Steelers by willing to sign this extension? Absolutely not. I think Ben is rejuvenated now that Todd Haley's not in his ear. He is looking at this, and I believe continues to look at this as a prove-it kind of season in some ways. He's going to come out. He's taken the high road on all this, right? Ben's not said a word with all the kerfuffle that's been coming out about, whether he's a good teammate, whether he's a good leader, all this nonsense, and you got people on both sides saying, one way or the other. But Ben has stayed on and taken the high road and just said, y'all can talk. I'll put the play on the line. In other words, I'll put my mouth where my money where my mouth is, and I'll show you on the field. Which is why I think he's a really competitive guy. Everybody that you ever talk to that knows him will tell you he tries to win at everything. There was an interview I heard recently, and I can't remember who it was with. I wish I could. Where they basically said, Ben's the best basketball player. He's going to beat you at basketball. He's going to beat you at shuffleboard. If you come in and you come in and invent a new game called Calvin Ball, and I'm making a Calvin and Hobbes reference. I don't care. Calvin Ball. Teach Ben how to play Calvin Ball, and he's going to be the best Calvin Ball player, and he's going to beat you. So, you bring up an interesting point when you talk about Ben makes receivers better. If you remember, it's probably 3-4 years ago now. One of the things I wrote early on in the site was what came first, Ben or AB, or kind of a series of who made who kind of articles. And I think we did 3 of them. And the thing is, Ben has had essentially, truly, honestly, one great receiver, and I'm giving props to Mr. Big Chest here, even though I don't want to either. But he's a great receiver. He's a great competitor on the field. Behind that, he's had really good receivers in like Hines Ward. But you go beyond those two. Where is the tremendous outpouring of receivers? You see guys like Mike Wallace who were good with the Steelers and then went on to not do so much. Really, the only one I can say that went on to have a lot of success is probably Emmanuel Sanders. Mm-hmm. But where are these other guys that are fleeing the Steelers and making huge names for themselves? They don't exist.
They never have.
Look, he made Kobe Hamilton look good.
Mm. Sammy Coates too, or he tried to anyway.
Sammy Coates. Yeah. Ben absolutely helps to elevate the play of those around him, and it especially includes the wide receivers. Now, while I do not expect Antonio Brown to have a bad season, I will be interested to see what kind of numbers he puts up in Oakland with not Ben Roethlisberger throwing to him.
Oh, we all know that's the the $1 million question there, and there's no magic answer for that until the games are actually played. But one thing is for certain now, definitely Antonio Brown as of late, as of recently, and we're talking about during their tenure with the Steelers, Emmanuel Sanders really wasn't lighting the world on fire. We all knew he was good and had the potential to be what he ended up being with Peyton Manning in Denver, and he still had some consistency even with the smorgasbord of, by the way, great word, of receivers that are out there, or not receivers that are out there, but quarterbacks that they've had out there in Denver ever since Peyton Manning, including a one, since we're talking quarterbacks and position groups, it just dawned on me to bring this one up. Remember when everyone wanted, it was what? Artie Burns went ahead of Paxton Lynch. Everyone's like, oh, Ben's successor's right there. Can you imagine Ben's still there and thinking Paxton Lynch was any good if he even got on the field, maybe? So, I mean, these things are so subjective. We always talk about whether or not there's even 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and Ben is being paid handsomely among them on an average salary basis. The only guy that's getting more money is Russell Wilson with an average of $35 million per year. Ben's getting $1 million less at 34. 30 is the new 20 in terms of this, because I mean, we remember even just a few years ago we were bulking at Derek Carr making about an average of $25 million right now. You got guys like Joe Flacco that are still Joe Flacco is now the 12th highest paid quarterback by average salary heading into the 2019 season at 22-1. Alex Smith, who we don't even know if he'll ever play again, at 23.5. It goes up to Andrew Luck, Drew Brees, Derek Carr, Matt Stafford, mentioned him, 27. Jimmy Garoppolo, who, you know, for all intents and purposes, looks like he could be one of these guys. He hasn't been healthy and on the field enough to show that he's worth $27.5 million at this point. Kirk Cousins, I don't know that we ever felt was worth, what did he get, $96 million overall or something ridiculous. And 28 there. Matt Ryan, here's another guy. I mean, he hasn't really won a whole lot. 30. Aaron Rodgers is a guy that, I mean, he passes the eyeball test, but look at what's going on in Green Bay. You talk about whether or not there's other divas or any other drama anywhere. The whole coaching staff, everything's gutted there. I mean, they're in a rebuild mode, and the Steelers have fortunately they haven't had to do that. You know, you had the 8-8 seasons, you had some drafts that maybe didn't work out or some free agent signings here or there that didn't work out. But overall, they remained competitive in a winning football team while also infusing it with more youth after having to, supplant how many different players from that great defense that got them to a handful or 2 Super Bowls and a handful of division titles from 2008 through about 2012 was when it fell apart. So, I mean, there was just a lot going on there. So, of course, your quarterback's going to be your highest paid guy, and this is the new number because now as these deals get tore up, I mean, Nick Foles is making $22 million a year. Eli Manning is in the territory of where Ben used to be at 21, and so is Phillip Rivers is in that same category, and Cam Newton. And then after that, it goes much further down the rabbit hole, beyond 20 mil or so. You got Andy Dalton, and then Tom Brady's got 15. But just to even bring up Tom Brady's contract, Tom Brady, you know, he had a 10 mil signing bonus, 10 mil guarantee. It was a 2-year deal. He's set to be a free agent next year, so that deal expires. But he was 28 mil in dead cap for last season. So as you're saying, he's still getting paid. A lot of people look at this with Ben too. Ben has 43.7 in dead cap this year. So Tom Brady's probably looking foolish. He got his deal, and then everybody else signed these new deals and just completely wrecked what was the new norm. We were talking about how many, if there would be a $30 million quarterback in the NFL, and now you have, 4 of them? Almost 5 of them. I mean, Kirk Cousins, it fluctuates because I'm doing it on average. Kirk Cousins got a ton of money last year. I'm actually pulling up what Kirk Cousins had. $84 million was the guarantee.
$84 million, yeah.
Yeah, so his dead cap last year was $84 million. And then some of the accounting that's still going here is 60, meaning if they cut him, this is how much money would still be on the books. So, I mean, his cap hit was 24. This year it's 29. Next year it's 31. And, I mean, it was a 3-year deal for $84 million. I mean, that's crazy. So, even in that regard, I mean, extending Ben now while you have some of the space because, you know, the Lev Bell stuff was off the books. They never had to pay him. They got some things accounted forward. There was some other restructuring that went on. And they didn't really do that with Ben they're paying Ben now and they're paying him less over the next 2 seasons because it's, they're rewarding him now. $25 million in 2020 is the dead cap, 12.5, which is funny to say 12.5 is considered a potential out for Ben Roethlisberger in his contract. I mean, $12.5 million. Or what other position would you ever say that's a potential out? It's not really, but that's where you're looking ahead because that's when Josh Dobbs, his contract's going to be expired. They're going to have to figure out if he's worth to keep as a backup, or Mason Rudolph, one of the guys that they were very keen on in last year's draft, 3rd round draft pick. It's only a 4-year rookie contract, so that would be his final year to see if he'd be able to do anything. We don't know if any of these guys are going to have an opportunity to play either by injury or just by sake of, let's say you're at the end of the year and it's one of those situations where like the GOAT got to go in, Landry Jones, and got to play a couple of times too against, like the Browns or whoever the final opponent is for that season. So I think that's where people are kind of focused on is, I don't know if they're focused on the money. I think some of them still believe that, they paid Ben, but they wouldn't pay Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown had the 2nd highest contract on the team. He had a very rich contract when he signed as a wide receiver. He had a pretty rich contract for an unproven receiver when he did his first deal, when they gave it to him instead of Mike Wallace. And then there was Le'Veon Bell, who would have broke and set the records for the running back market as he wanted to, but it wasn't enough to make him happy, and he took a lesser deal with the Jets. So here you go. You got one guy that was unhappy, wanted traded, and wanted even more money that they weren't going to give it to. You had another guy that wanted even more money, even though they went to give him the money and reset his position at running back. Now you have a guy that's definitely deserving, has played, 15 seasons, and I called him a kingmaker because I go through the list, and I know I'm getting long-winded, Brian, hold with me here, but I go through the list of receivers and you think, here's all the top career leaders, at least for the Steelers, franchise guys. Hines Ward, 12,083 yards. Antonio Brown was going to catch him. 11,207 was where Antonio Brown was at. He probably would have caught him this upcoming season. Those are the top 2 guys. Antonio Brown's production, 100%, with a few asterisks here or there if he caught a pass or something from Mike Vick or Landry Jones or whoever a backup may have been that was playing at the same time. Almost entirely, that's from Ben Roethlisberger. Some of Hines Ward has come from Ben Roethlisberger. I know you said he really only had one All-Pro, and the reason for that is that when Ben came around, Hines Ward was a Pro Bowl player in 01, 02, 03, and 04, never went back after that. So by the time Ben arrives and starts being the guy, Hines Ward was still, putting up like 900 some yards receiving, 70 catches here or there. He had 2,000 yard plus years, but double-digit TDs in 2005, and he did that in 02 and 03. So he was still a solid receiver, even with a different cast of guys, like maybe a Cordell Stewart or a Tommy Maddox or whoever may have been under center there. But you look at some of the other players that are on this list and whether or not Ben Roethlisberger is responsible for their production. Heath Miller, fourth overall and all-time, 65-69. That's entirely Ben Roethlisberger. Okay, Louis Lips, Lynn Swann, LB Nickel, Buddy Dial. You get down to number 9, Plaxico Burress. Okay, not really. You go to Mike Wallace, number 10, 4,042 yards. Yes, entirely. Santonio Holmes, 38-35. Yes, entirely. And that's kind of where you're at. Le'Veon Bell somewhere here at 20 with 26.60. Juju Smith-Schuster's already climbing at number 23 with 23.43. Antoine Randall L. Yes, almost entirely attributed to Ben Roethlisberger and his success, and so on and so forth. You see that a lot of the names all-time have to attribute to one of the all-time greats at the court, maybe the all-time great at the Steelers quarterback position. Why on earth would you not want to lock this guy up through age 40? There's no reason, I think, to risk, and we're going to talk about Dobbs and Rudolph as part of this too in the depth chart, and then there's another guy still. But there's no reason to risk moving on from Ben at this time or in the foreseeable future. He's obviously set as the starter for 2019 and then some.
Yeah, it's just smart. You touched on all the key points. There's really not a lot more to say about it. But I want to flip this before you start talking about the other guy.
Other guy.
There was a brilliant. Please acknowledge the sarcasm dripping from my voice. A brilliant little image going around on the Twitterverse yesterday that incensed Steelers fans to a certain degree, that attempted to lay out the elite, good, great, good, whatever, quarterbacks. And of course, Ben was placed down there with Jimmy G, and I can't remember who else. Cam Newton was ahead of him. Somebody else that didn't deserve to be ahead of him was ahead of him. Anybody who thinks Ben Roethlisberger is not an elite quarterback has their head screwed on wrong.
You mean David Carr? Remember that?
Well,
that
David
was last
Carr's
year.
a mental case. I'm sorry. I think we stated that when he came out and said his brother was better than Ben. He's a moron.
I mean, there's so many people that are like that. I mean, I get some of it. Even us just having this discussion and talking about it is finding things to talk about in the NFL offseason because there's nothing else to talk about. We were all speculated on the draft. We speculated on the offseason. And now it's like, now what? Now what do we do? And, we're looking at all these position groups, and it's like, well, it's a relief to know that Ben's locked up. They usually do it in 2 years in advance with the quarterbacks. With Ben, it's been a little bit different. And, I mean, Ben's getting his money now, and I imagine they're going to have a lot of cap space because Antonio Brown's contract's going to come off of, I said his name. But anyways, his contract's coming off of the books, and there's a few other things that are going on. They're going to be shuffling some things around. And, they went out in free agency and actually spend some money this season. I can see them doing it next season too until they have to start, locking up some more of the younger talent. You're going to have, TJ Watt's going to need a 5th-year option at some point in the future. Juju was a 2nd-round pick, so he's eventually going to get paid as well. This is his 3rd season, so next year is when some of these deals are going to start happening. So that's why Ben is getting all the money now, because there wasn't as many other pressing needs to lock some players up. I still feel there's a few, there's some of the fruit that's still hanging there. Artie Burns isn't getting a 5th-year option done. He'll be a free agent. We don't even know that he'll make it out of training camp at this point with how many corners are there on that depth chart. I've talked about, others from that draft class, such as Sean Davis or Javon Hargrave, and there's some other contracts that are going to need to be addressed too, like a Joe Hayden and that. So these are things that are going to end up happening in the following offseason, or maybe even this offseason. They may, jump the gun and try and get a few of these guys extended beyond the 2019 season. But right now for quarterback, I think they're all entirely locked up. I mean, Ben is obviously the guy. If there was ever any doubt, this is Ben Roethlisberger's franchise records. He passed Terry Bradshaw in October of 2012 for most passing yards as a Steelers quarterback, and in December of 2013 for most passing touchdowns. So he has that. He has the highest winning percentage or record as a starting quarterback. He's 13-7 in the playoffs. He has the highest passer rating at 93.8, highest completion percentage, the longest pass completion, obviously, with Juju, which has been duped twice now. Most pass attempts, most completions. Obviously, you're going to have all that if you have all the yards and the touchdowns. Most times sacked, obviously, too, because he's played the most games of any quarterback. But he has 124 200-plus yard passing games. He has 41 300-plus yard passing games. He has the most consecutive games with 300 yards passing at 4. He has 10 400-plus yard passing games and 3 500-plus, which – does that put him as his own category, or maybe like someone else or a couple someone else's?
No. That's 2 more than anyone else.
2 more than anyone else. I thought so. I thought he, and he doesn't get the credit. Everybody's like, oh, why are you paying Big Ben? Skip Bayless is out there asking, do you think he still wants to win? I look at this, and this guy's, he's still doing all of this. And I don't know, he didn't go publicly, he didn't go like on social media and start making certain demands or making rap songs or country music songs or whatever it may be with certain demands. And here you go, he has stuff that hasn't happened with anybody else. He's one of a few guys that are actually a quarterback and has a Super Bowl ring too. How many are playing right now? I mean, you have Flacco obviously out in Denver now. He got traded from Baltimore. But for the longest time, the AFC was only sending Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger out there as the representative for the Super Bowl, and Brady's been overwhelmingly winning them. You got Russell Wilson, who's won a ring. I think I'm missing someone somewhere, but I mean, that's pretty much it. What? Aaron Rodgers. So, I mean, you got what, like 5 guys, maybe tops, 5, 6 guys that have a Super Bowl ring that's a quarterback. You think that's worth anything? Oh, Eli Manning's another one. He has 2 rings, of course.
Yeah, Eli has 2.
So, I mean, Phillip Rivers doesn't even have this stuff. And I could go on and on with Ben, like 3+ touchdown passing games, 45. 4 plus, 14, 5 plus, 5, and 6 plus. He's had 2 of them. And that's kind of one of those things, too. He has the most passing yards, a single game with 522, most completions with 44. Just, it goes on and on and on and on. And game-winning drives, I mean, he's even doubled up Terry Bradshaw in that statistical category as far as a career. Almost doubled up, 42 to 23. There's just nobody else. I mean, there's he who shall not be named that, threw a lot of picks in the Super Bowl in the mid-'90s under Bill Cowher. Rhymes with O'Connell. And there's Cordell Stewart.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like expunge him from the records, right? But, I mean, come on. Cordell Stewart, Bubby Brister, Bobby Lane, Jim Finks, Mark Malone, Tommy Maddox, and Mike Tomczak are in the top 10 when it comes to passing yards for the Steelers. Cliff Stout's down there at like 14, Terry Hanratty. I mean, these are, do you feel comfortable with having another name like that? Because that's where we're at with Josh Dobbs, and that's where we're at with Mason Rudolph, and we're going to discuss them. But first, I'll let you close the book on Ben, because Ben's in a category all his own. I do feel he does get besmirched by the usual national media in the NFL for not being the player that he is, and we just listed all of this stuff, and there's players out there like Aaron Rodgers who haven't even sniffed these type of records.
Yeah, we talked about this not that long ago, where I said, I get that people watch Aaron Rodgers play and think he is the second coming of, Johnny Unitas, or the greatest quarterback to walk the face of the earth. And I keep going, you know what? When do we start questioning that? Because what's he won? And how often has he won it? And where have the Packers been in the last few seasons? How many playoff wins? I get it. People want to look at Ben, and he has never gotten the respect that he deserves. I mean, from referees to fans to his the national media. It's the way it's always been, and it is to a certain extent beyond ridiculous. He's probably the toughest quarterback to play anytime in our lifespans. One of he's got some of that old school throwback lineman mentality, which is part of why a lot of us like him. Is he arrogant sometimes? Yeah. Does he have a sense of humor that people don't get? Yeah. So what? Who cares?
Yeah.
That doesn't take away from what he's done. And what he's done hasn't really been done by anybody else, at least not wearing the black and gold. So are there quarterbacks who have done more? Sure. But there's situations in games where the only quarterback I'd want is Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that, when you're paying a quarterback so much money, there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, why don't they sign this veteran quarterback? Or I even saw something that was about Brogan Roback, who was brought in. He was like the fourth guy with you saw him on Hard Knocks with the Cleveland Browns last year. He was essentially the fourth guy in that camp. They had Tyrod Taylor, and they had of course, Baker Mayfield, and I'm trying to think who else was on that roster. And so they bring him in. He's going to be kind of a camp arm. The Steelers got to see him some in the preseason. They got to evaluate them. They know their enemies pretty close. In fact, the teams they usually lock up with in the preseason, they've been known to snag a body or two from the Eagles or the Panthers when they're dropped from those teams, as well as their own AFC North rivals. So they get a little bit of up close and personal, because when they're evaluating film on their own players, they're seeing their own Steelers, their own teammates and whatnot in the film room go up against these other players, so you have a little bit more intimate knowledge about somebody like a Brogan Roback. With that said, Brogan has a very uphill battle. I mean, I like him. I think he has a strong arm. But to beat out Josh Dobbs, who beat the GOAT out for the backup job last year, I mean, that's a pretty tall order. And of course, I said Mason Rudolph. There were memes floating around like, get yourself a significant other, be it get someone who looks at you the same way that Mike Tomlin looks at Mason Rudolph. That's the way it was put out there.
Yeah.
And it was like, he looked like he was salivating at him at his pro day. And I was so worried that they were going to blow like a first round pick on maybe Mason Rudolph, and they did not. And in the third, I know you were still hesitant about it, and this was the reason you were hesitant about it, because Ben gets extended, Mason never plays, Mason goes somewhere else or is out of the league, and what did that pick do for you now? Well, it just added some depth, and it may have added a solid quarterback, because I still don't think they knew what they had in Josh Dobbs. Now, some of us, and Tommy Jaggy, who, formerly now of SCU, he has jumped to another website to run that on his own, and congrats and tip of the hat to Tommy and all the hard work he's done here, was always a Josh Dobbs truther, and he kind of opened my eyes to that before the preseason even happened last year. And then he was just, how many drives did he sustain of 60 plus or 75, even 75 yards, 75 yard drives? I think he had 6 drives in the preseason last year that he led, and I think it was like out of 7 drives, almost every drive he had, he led them, marched them down the field, showed that he was a leader, and it ended in a touchdown, be it a rushing touchdown or he's throwing the ball, or we've even seen him lay out and dive to win in closing seconds in the preseason. And I don't think anybody was expecting a whole lot of, a fourth-round draft choice to come out. And he is a rocket scientist. He's a verified genius. He looks like it on the field at times. Now, he came in, was that the Baltimore game where he had to throw that zippy pass? He got in for like one snap when Ben got his bell rung. And pretty much the hero converting a first down there. And it was a laser beam. But regardless, he stood tall in the pocket. He called an audible to a pass. That wasn't even supposed to be a pass play, if you remember. But that's all the more we get to really see of him. We don't get to see a whole lot. So we don't know if he has it took Landry Jones how many years, and he looked like a deer in headlights during the preseason. He was getting murdered behind a, hodgepodge offensive line of guys that aren't in the NFL anymore, third, fourth, fifth stringers that come into camp. And he just didn't look the part. He came in, actually looked more the part than Michael Vick did at the time. At times looked absolutely horrible too. I mean, I got to say it, even though he was my guy and I had high hopes on him. Josh Dobbs looks every bit the part right now. Just to whether or not, when you're playing the JVs versus the varsity, as to whether or not he could do it. I do assume, though, that he may be battling for a backup position. He may have a battle to be the backup to Ben this season, because I think some opportunity will be given to Rudolph. But I still think Josh Dobbs is the guy right behind Ben.
I think going into camp, that's absolutely correct. And I will say this. I think that if coming out of camp, Josh Dobbs is still your number 2, that does not bode well for Mason Rudolph.
No.
And the reason I say that is you're talking about a guy who was a high-valued pick. They had him rated as a first-round pick. A high third-round pick in his second year. And while, yes, he did not get tons of snaps, really, I don't think any in the regular season, and limited snaps in the preseason as well. There is an expectation that he will be much more comfortable, and his skill set will come more into play in this second year. So if he does not push Josh Dobbs heavily, and I don't want to say he has to win the second, the backup position, but if he doesn't at least make a really strong push for Josh Dobbs not being the number 2, then it's going to be hard to think that Mason Rudolph is going to have any kind of an extended Steelers career, because quite frankly, that's year 2. You've only got him under contract for 2 more. And at that point, you then have to try and re-sign him, and it's going to be a real tough task when they haven't seen anything from him.
That's exactly kind of the point, and I think that's where some people get a little leery about extending Ben. They're worried that, Ben talked about his own retirement not too long ago. Now he doesn't have an expiration date. And I think he sees Tom Brady, and you always hear him, when he's done these interviews, saying, well, I'm not going to do I don't know how he does it. I can't see myself playing at that age. And Brady's going to turn 42. Ben's 37 right now. So Ben will be approaching his 40s when that contract's set to expire. Whether he plays beyond that's a whole other story, or whether the Steelers start looking at different quarterbacks and things of that nature. But, you're absolutely right, and that's the reason I even think Rudolph got a little bit more snaps. I mean, Landry Jones came in one game and had a perfect passer rating. He was 4-4 and had a touchdown, and then that was it. And you didn't even see him for one or two of the preseason games, and all of a sudden it almost seemed like his position was safe because he looked so sharp. But then you had Dobbs go out there and be an absolute leader, and they were trying to give a lot of the share of playing time because Ben didn't really play a whole lot. Like 2 series in the third game of the 4 exhibition
barely,
games? Yeah. So, I mean, it's like they were trying to see what they already had. Now, you come through, you're no longer a rookie. You no longer have all the, rigors of having gone through the offseason process with, going straight from college into the combine and then into all of the rookie type stuff. There'll still be some of that where they're eligible. Dobbs' third year, I don't believe eligible for any of that now, but some of the second year players are, and then they're going to be able to evaluate more. Mason Rudolph, by the way, so 54.5% completion percentage with maybe not so great of, a team around him and who he was playing and throwing to. 315 yards combined, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Pretty decent, solid numbers when you're considering where and how they're playing. Now, Josh Dobbs was actually 11th overall in passing yards in the preseason last year by virtue of some other players playing a lot more or having a lot more completions and attempts. Dobbs was 29 of 43, 67.4% completion percentage, very sharp. He got to play a little bit with a hodgepodge of some starters. 434 yards on his average, 4-2 TD to INT ratio. His quarterback rating was 112. Well, let me see. Mason Rudolph had a 90.6, which isn't bad at all. Mason Rudolph kind of passes the eyeball test as far as when I saw him during camp and the few preseason games, he didn't look as scared as somebody as like a Landry Jones. He already looked like a polished and refined player, and even to that kind of effect, Dobbs got a lot of snaps as a rookie because Ben would take a day off in camp, veteran privilege. Landry Jones was banged up a little bit to where Dobbs got a lot more snaps. He seized the opportunity. He became the guy. That's going to be interesting to see where the splits are this year. Because the first 2 weeks, most of the starters aren't playing. Ben's not playing, and it's going to be up to Dobbs and or Rudolph, whoever gets the nod in each game. I expect them to each play a half. Unfortunately for Brogan Roback, unless there's knock on wood once again, something that happens, I don't know that they're going to invest a whole lot of time and effort in. He's there to kind of run through the drills and get some of the other guys kind of prepped for, scrimmages if they have any or exhibition games. So it's going to be interesting to see if Dobbs or Rudolph is the guy, if they alternate them, if one just plays a first half and a second half so you get to see who they play with. I talked about Ben being a kingmaker. It was a very specific term that popped in my head because that's what Dobbs and Rudolph have to do in order to either one of them win the backup position. They have to be a kingmaker and make all of these other receivers, an incoming Deontay Johnson or someone that's still on the roster like Trey Griffey. They have to make these guys look like gold so they look like gold and they end up getting that backup spot because that's really what they're jostling for is life beyond Ben. Who's going to be the guy? Who's still going to be there? Who's still going to have a contract when that time expires?
Absolutely. It's one of those ineffable qualities of a quarterback that is going to show you that he's got that franchise musk about him, is the fact that he makes other players better. And Dobbs and Rudolph are going to have to, as you said, they're going to have to show that. And probably the one that shows it the most is the one that's going to end up with the number 2 position when all is said and done. And as much as Brogan Roback seems to be a fun guy, and we enjoy him and his antics, I just don't see it as unless. And I'm going to knock on my head because it's the only wood that's around here. Is
I thought it was bone. I thought you were boneheaded.
Wooden-headed, boneheaded. Who knows? Some people think it's made of concrete. But either way, unless there's a season-ending injury to one of the 2 primary backups, I don't see Brogan Roback hanging on long-term with the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate too, because if there wasn't a Dobbs or a Rudolph and you were still kind of hanging and that, they signed him to be the number 3, I'd be totally cool with it. I think he's an all right guy to even, have the earpiece or clipboard or whatever, because, I mean, face it, when you're paying someone $34 million, they shouldn't be coming off the field. And that's the way it needs to work. But then again, what was it? Mullins or whatever got in for the 49ers because you had Beathard got hurt, who was the backup after Jimmy G got hurt. So you never know. And you see what happens with teams from there. And some of it's just, it's experience, lack of, not everybody's a Tom Brady. That's a very rare instance where somebody comes in beneath on the bottom of the depth chart, comes in as a lower round draft pick, and also ends up winning a starting job and having the success that they have. That just doesn't happen every day. Almost every quarterback that's in the NFL that's starting right now more than likely came in with a lot of accolades, so to speak, or they're coming in with accolades if they happen to be a rookie like a Kyler Murray or something of that nature. So, yeah, when it comes to Dobbs, it's going to be interesting because they're two different style of players, too. And I've noticed over the Mike Tomlin era, there's the mobile quarterback thing. Even Ben was mobile, you know what I mean? But they've always, I wouldn't say Charlie Batch was necessarily mobile, but Byron Leftwich and Michael Vick definitely were. Bruce Gradkowski's been a pocket guy. Landry Jones is a pocket guy. So you got like either a finesse passer or a guy that's capable of scrambling, and that's what you have, I think, in this case. Dobbs definitely has the rocket arm. We know he can go downfield. We know Rudolph could go downfield, the big play stuff. That's what we're used to seeing with the Steelers offense. So it's going to be intriguing to see, at least as a backup quarterback battle. You got to go by the preseason because there's not a whole lot to go on with the other guys. And, when we end up heading out to camp and doing some of our analysis there, we'll probably be able to tell you a little bit more on, who's sharing reps here, who's sharing reps there. But I think it's going to be almost split unless one of the horses pulls away. And then hopefully there's no disqualification or instant replay or anything of that nature. Al Riveron called in on the Kentucky Derby there, Brian.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. The Kentucky Derby. I don't know anything about horse racing. Yeah.
Hockey, horse racing. If it's not Steelers, this guy really does bleed black and gold until he's dead and cold. So,
absolutely.
I don't know. You got anything else as far as the quarterbacks? It was kind of. I'm surprised we talked this much about them as it is. To be honest, I thought, wow, this can be a short program or a short episode because there's 3 guys, and then there's the guy that's coming into camp in Roback. And, that's just kind of the way it is. Although, I will rewind one thing. We did get to see Josh Dobbs against the Raiders. And the Steelers had enough confidence in him to leave him in there. For better or worse, X-ray equipment didn't work, whatever, or they just had confidence, or they were babying Ben. Cost them a crucial victory, I think, there. But once again, we talked about you can't necessarily hang your hat on that. This is the same thing I defended Landry Jones for years. I'll defend Josh Dobbs in much the same way. You come in the middle of a game, what are you doing? You're sitting on the bench or you have one of these Surface tablets, you're standing on the sidelines, and all of a sudden, oh crap, this guy's hurt. I got to go in there. It's, the middle of the third quarter, or, the start of the second half or whatever. You've been sitting after warm-ups. You were already warmed up. Now you're cooled down. Now you got to go back out there and get on the same rhythm and page with all of the other players, with starters that you probably don't take snaps with regularly. And it's just, it's a heck of a challenge for any backup quarterback to come in and do when you have a franchise player ahead of you. And, this isn't, Cleveland or Baltimore last season where, they draft a quarterback and these guys they're looking to be the future, and they're giving them a lot of practice time. Josh Dobbs is not getting, after camp, he's not getting that benefit of the doubt. So when you're already into December, looking at in a game in that situation, you're coming cold off the bench. That's a tough challenge, man. So I kind of want to write that off, the interception and everything that he had there. Unfortunate. I think if he's better prepped, even a week of prep time is very difficult, depending on the opponent that you're going to end up playing. But I think he's at least showed some poise there, and it also showed that's where the Steelers' confidence was. Of course, they can't put Mason Rudolph out there when he's inactive on game day and doesn't get a helmet. So that was never really an option. I'm not sure who the third option was. I keep forgetting because it used to be Heath Miller was the emergency quarterback way back in the day, and I forget who had that responsibility last year. It was discussed too, and I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't either. And I agree with you. Look, yes, they're supposed to prepare themselves as if they're going to start, but we all know that the truth of the matter is they're running the practice team. They're not getting the snaps that they should get or need to get if they're going to participate. And the difference between that and the preseason, where he looked so good, is just that he's getting a lot of work with the starters, with the Steelers playbook, instead of running the opposition team. Running the scout team and pretending he is the Raiders rather than running what the Steelers run. So I'm willing to give that, as you said, a pass as well. But I do expect continued growth out of him and out of Mason Rudolph. And hopefully we will see that as camp in the preseason unwinds.
Absolutely, buddy. So why don't we tell everyone who won the March of Dimes? You ended up pulling the rabbit out of the hat, or the name out of the hat, and who got the Rod Woodson full-size autographed helmet for participating in what is for a great cause, but also a contest for a great prize.
Yeah, the gentleman who won was Frank Wistowski, and I'll be the first to say I have no idea if I'm saying your name right, Frank. I'm sure you'll correct me. And that helmet will be going out to him this weekend. So it is, as I said when I did the video of pulling it, greatly appreciated everybody who donated. We'll do it again next year. Who knows what will be given away, but it'll be something, Steelers.
Yeah, as it always is. So, and also keep an eye on our site and our social media, as we're going to have some opportunities for some other giveaways coming up in the very near future. So once again, Brian, thanks for joining me. And, hopefully we don't have to battle for the host position here anytime soon.
No, I don't. Look, I don't want to do that.
It's because we would do Thunderdome rules, Two men enter, one man leave. So would you be master or blaster, by the way?
I don't know what that means.
Oh, you don't even know the Mel Gibson references with the Mad Max movies?
I'm going to tell you, based on just my own physiological makeup, I'm definitely blaster.
So I'm the brains of the operation. That's good to know. So, anyways, wait, did you say master or blaster? You got to be blaster. That's right. Anyways,
I said blaster. Yes.
Yes, I thought you did. I don't know. I'm losing my mind here, and it's time to let everyone go. And we'll catch you again early next week with another episode of the Steel City Underground Steelers podcast. Once again, my name is Joe Kuzma. His name is Brian E. Roach. We encourage all of our listeners to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.